Welcome, everyone. Thanks for being a part of this. We got a unique situation today because we have Jim Rembach, who most of you know, but haven't seen too much of him through CCNG land. Jim, last time you were physically in front of a group of members, Charlotte, maybe 10 years ago, something like that.
I think we did something online in between then.
Okay. Okay. But physical face to face, it's been a while, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah. Um, and Jim is going to be working today with Jason Mercer-Pottinger, and many of you know Jason from the Baxter days, but he's not Baxter International anymore, and he changed his background. So he's now Senior Director of Customer Care over at Vantive, and he's going to tell that story, and Jim's going to guide us through all of this today. Jim's what part of our Academy program. If you are unaware of Jim, he is oh my God, he's been around as long as I have. I think he's old, like me and Lon. So what can I say?
So my first experience with CCNG was like back in 1995 or 1996 when I was working in Memphis for AutoZone. I went down to an event down in Atlanta.
That's right. It was. Did that event have lunch?
Yes, it did.
Yeah, we got cheaper over the years, but yeah, that was quite the turnout. We didn't know what to do. But anyway, Jim, thank you for being a part of the Academy program. And for those of you who don't know, those are consultants who are ready, willing, and able to have a discussion about whatever's ailing you or some things you want to look into. So, Jim, I'm going to turn things over to you here in just a minute. But first, let me remind our group of some upcoming stuff we've got. Whoops. Thank you for coming. Bye. Upcoming, we have a Minneapolis meeting next week. And then we will, as Jim just mentioned, Atlanta. I think we are kicking this out to maybe the February timeframe. Casey, you're going to be involved in that. Does that sound about right?
That sounds right. That'll give us plenty of time to get a big turnout.
Okay.
Get a turnout, yeah.
Perfect. So if you're interested or you have colleagues in those areas that would like to attend, just let us know or let Jillian know or go to the website. We're more than happy to provide you with the information. So with that and without further ado, Jim, would you launch us out?
I'll be glad to, and thank you for that. Okay, so for messaging purposes in regards to me and engaging with you, I'm working off of dual screens. I put the Zoom over here, but I put the presentation in front of me so I can stay focused forward. Just in case you see me looking to the right, I'm not ignoring you. But I'm honored to get the opportunity to be able to share what we're getting ready to share with somebody who I've respected for a very long time. He's one of the, to me, a handful of visionaries that I've had the opportunity to work with in this industry. We call him JMP.
Most people do, in fairness. So yeah,
yeah. And he's going to, and I'm going to actually really, get the opportunity to support him on this stage, as well as I'm getting the opportunity to do it with his people. So the reality is, for all of us, things are shifting so darn fast. If we don't at least get an understanding of and cut through the smoke of what's going on out there, we're going to be probably one of these people who you see right here at Accenture. We either need to get on board or get out of the way. And that's really the choices that we have in regards to AI. And it applies both, for all of us in a lot of different ways. And we're going to focus in on leadership development and how that is absolutely transforming. But we need to make sure that AI is actually coming to the rescue in regards to helping us to develop our leaders versus it being a risk. So let me get my slide advanced here. All right. So again, the star of the show is my friend, JMP, and I'm going to give him an opportunity to share a little bit in regards to like what David was talking about. He was with Baxter, who they are now, where they're going. There's some things that he can't share, and some things that he is very open to sharing, how he plans to get there. And then also, I really want to focus in on something that for him is near and dear, personally as well as professionally, and that's his focus around servant leadership and people first, and how that keeps him grounded, and how the entire organization is wanting to do that same thing. So JMP, if you can tell us a little bit about who's Vantiv.
So probably the last time I was actually presenting to this group, it was all blue. So we've shifted from blue and we've moved into plum is the official color, or purple. Vantiv was the renal divisions within Baxter, and we spun off as a completely separate company in the end of January this year. So dialysis hasn't really changed much over the last 40 years, to be honest. The devices have got smaller, but if you take them apart, it's pretty much still a pump. It's either pumping hemodialysis or it's pumping fluid into patients' peritoneal to do dialysis either every 3 or 4 days or overnight if they're doing it in their home. So to be a standalone dialysis organization, provider, manufacturer, is like, what are we going to do that's actually different from what we've done before, right? And so when we look at Vantiv and what it stands for, a lot of it is around the digital services. That's really how we're going to position ourselves. We are positioning ourselves in the marketplace as something different. We're not Baxter version 2. We're actually Vantiv, standalone organization, providing innovative services around the medical devices that we've had out in the marketplace for a long time. So when we look at my organization, and we were talking about this actually before I joined, I probably the last time I spoke to you guys, I had an organization of probably about 100. And now across the Americas, we have a team of 600 across all of our direct-to-patient marketplaces. So it's grown substantially as we've spun out from Baxter. And so the big thing for us working with Jim was around, okay, we typically do all this leadership training, right? We get them in a classroom, we bore them to death with tons of slides, and then we have the whole graduation, they get a certificate and they're trained. That doesn't really work when, first of all, a lot of our folks are at home, and also we need to do something different to ensure that they have skills and the ability to have access to the materials that they've learned in a more sort of like immersive, I'm going to say, setting than just the classroom. And Jim will come on to that a little bit. So we wanted to do something different. We wanted to make sure that our teams are being set up for success. As Jim said, right, AI is coming along. So how do we make sure that our folks have AI and digital acumen, as well as being able to lead differently? And yeah, servant leadership, I have a team of 600 people. Unfortunately, I can't get them all on the call, but my job is to serve them and make sure that they then feel comfortable with serving our customers and patients. And in a healthcare setting, servant leadership is key. Our new CEO, Chris Toth, he talks about this all the time. If you follow him on LinkedIn, it's all around how we serve our customers and patients. And our sort of strapline at customer care is, how do we serve more better, right? So we're looking at innovation as well as just the stuff that we typically do day in, day out. So I'm excited to be here today for Jim to share, because it isn't really all about me. Jim's actually a great partner, and we've done some pretty exciting stuff as we look at how we set up not only our leaders today, but also our supervisors in training for tomorrow. Right. So we want to make sure that this is a leadership pipeline, not just for the leaders that we have currently, but also as we look to our leaders for tomorrow, that's really going to be the ones that push the organization forward as we look further ahead for the next sort of like 5-10 years plus.
And you bring up a really excellent point. So one of the things that I saw as an opportunity, because when I was in operations working for Deluxe Financial Services, which was the check printing company, they did not have a way by which they were actually grooming people for that, frontline leader role, whatever you want to call it, supervisor, team lead, team manager. It's different within different organizations, but for Deluxe, it was supervisor. And so when I came in and started working with them, I actually was employed, and I had come from AutoZone. I had mentioned before a lot of people jumped on that I was in AutoZone in their contact centers, and we went from 8 people to 800 in 2 years. So understanding how all that works and how you need to fill a leadership pipeline is critical. And so I had mentioned to JMP, I said, you know what, we have to have a perpetual process of grooming people. I said, we really need to consider having what I call an SIT, or a supervisor in training program. Now, it is an official paid program, or official paid position within the organization. However, we need to start taking these people who are our high potentials and start grooming them so that when they get put in the role, their likelihood of success as well as their learning curve, I mean, it just increases significantly. So that's an important point. Now, JMP, what he didn't share, and he may not be able to share, but he has 4 main pillars in his America's Customer Care strategy. And the one, and with what we're doing, we're actually impacting all of those. And we're not going to get into that detail. However, he talks about empowering people, and this is where the servant leadership and people first grounding comes in from, is critical. So actually, JMP, if you can just kind of drill a little bit more into the empowering our people and what that means to you.
We were part of a very bureaucratic, huge organization that had been around for 90 years, right? Which I sort of like refer to Baxter as sort of like the dinosaur or the elephant that you're trying to turn on a halfpenny piece. It doesn't happen very quickly. And we sat in a huge organization where the patient focus was pretty much on the B2B side of the organization, not direct to consumer. So we were sort of like the oddballs in the organization because of our direct to patients. So when we look at how do we ensure that we're setting our people up for success and empowering them, it's giving them skills where actually they can make decisions more quickly at that initial point of interaction without having to go through all the hierarchical levels of red tape that we had previously, which makes us then more agile as an organization and also improves that customer and patient experience because it doesn't feel as if we're just giving like a bulk standard answer to questions. We're actually treating our patients as individuals and understanding they have chronic conditions, and each patient comes with a different set of situations, circumstances that they need us to support. So again, it's sort of like it's empowering our people to make the right decision, sometimes different decisions, but making sure that the patient is at the very focus of it. So it's setting our people up for success, which then will set our customers and then our patients up for success long term.
And to talk about what we're referring to here as far as the practical application and enablement piece. So servant leadership is something that is a major focus within the organization. But during one of our discussions, JMP shared with me, he goes, we talk a lot about servant leadership. He goes, but I don't know if we really know how to do it.
Yeah.
Model it and display it. So what we did is we built a servant leader app. And so what it does, it gives people the opportunity to know how to apply servant leadership so that you can model it and our people can see it. And then that becomes something that really is engaging and empowering when you start talking about a culture. And like JMP had said, they're all remote. If we don't have that strong bond keeping the culture together and see that commonality that we're part of a bigger purpose, it falls apart and dilutes really darn quick. So for a little bit of background about me, I shared a little bit. My background is in single site, multi-site. I worked for a company that measured the customer experience for a very long time, and we took data and interpreted it to be able to affect and impact change. I am a coach. I'm also a pitching coach in baseball. I'm emotional intelligence certified. I became a mental performance coach and have a mastery certification in that. But then with the things that are coming around and what we're doing now, learning more and more and building my skills from an AI perspective. And as I had mentioned, I was a member of CCNG. I had a little laminated card back in 1996. But JMP, I'm going to put me on the spot. When you start talking about from when our first discussions and when we actually started, doing the work and making some impact, I remember vividly when I said, JMP, I said, we can do some things with AI that we've just never been able to do before in our existence. And you rolled your eyes at me, right? You're like, oh no, AI. So what do you think about AI and what it can do for us now versus when you and I first started, or even before that, because there's a lot of hype and a lot of noise in regards to AI.
And I'm sure if you take a poll of people on the call and say to them, how many times have you been to conferences and webinars like this where everybody just rams AI down your throat? And so when Jim started on about AI, it's like, oh, Jesus, for the love of God, really? We're really going to have this conversation? But actually, it's using AI in a way that actually adds value, right? And so when we look at it from a learning and development perspective, there isn't actually a lot out there where AI is being used for that, right? It's being used in the contact center either for IVA, so the front door piece, agent assist, right? So how it's pulling information real time from knowledge bases and repositories of data, right, to assist the agents when they're real time, and then the back end when it's doing the AI QA piece, right? But I've not seen anything where it's being used like in an LMS environment to enable folks to continue learning after the sort of like the learning has already happened, or the coaching sessions happened, or they can refer to it, and AI can take the information and tailor it to a particular set of circumstances that will help the individual, but then also can be used to help other individuals as they come onto the tool. So that's where I got excited. So initially, yeah, I did roll my eyes. I thought, okay, Jim, this isn't going to work. But then when we started to just sort of like thrash it out a little bit more, it's like, okay, I can see the value of this, and it's very different from typically the AI that we get to see within our centers when we look to some of the typical stuff that you get from Genesis and other sort of providers.
And that's a really good point, is when we start talking about the use case, right? There's a lot of different types of use cases. And even working with JMP's team, I talked to them about, we don't want to just do the work. We have to really, take some time and think about how we're going about and doing the work, so that we can actually, talking about that, AI acumen as well as business acumen. Business acumen for frontline leaders in the contact center has always been a significant gap. And why is that? Because they're tactical, right? We got to get this work in and out. And so therefore, learning how to think strategically about redoing work is like them learning a new language, just like AI is learning a new language. So it's a process that you have to go through in order to help open up people's thought processes and neural pathways on, I never really thought about that. I even had one person give me some feedback and said, well, we need to have an analyst come in here and map out these processes. And I'm like, no, you're the analyst, right? You're the one who's closest to this work. And I asked the question, I said, well, do you want something to built by somebody else that doesn't actually represent the work that you're doing? They're like, heck no. I said, then you need to learn how to be the analyst. So it's a different thought process that people need to go through. So digital acumen, when we start talking about a competitive, differentiator, and much like we talked about that comment on the first slide with Accenture's basically telling their people, learn AI or get out. It's coming. And I tell this story about one time many years ago when I walked into Midway Airport when they first started having the ticketing kiosk. So yes, I'm dating myself. And I walked into Midway Airport for my departure, and I started looking around, didn't see a kiosk. A ticket agent came up to me and said, "Can I help you?" And I said, "Where's the kiosks?" And she looked at me and she said, "We don't have kiosks here at Midway Airport because they take jobs." And my thought was, and I hope yours is first, because she was nasty. And so we have a choice. We can either take her positioning and we're going to get run over by this train, or, we can learn to get on board and maybe even learn how to service those kiosks, right? Be the one who's in front. So digital acumen, it matters. It's critical now. And AI is, can be a leadership multiplier if we use it appropriately. Supervisors can learn faster and apply faster and have it be sustainable, and it'll help us prepare for the future. That's our new imperative. And so the perspectives that we need to have on AI is that I need to really work on having my people build some digital fluency so they understand. So for example, when we start talking about the work that we're actually going to reveal a little bit more, we've created a new glossary of terms, over 100 new terms associated with how we can leverage AI in the workplace to develop leaders. So it can support some faster learning and scale our leadership development process. So there's a whole lot of noise out there, and I even see commercials on major television where people are talking about all of these things as far as what AI can do. And I'm like, that's not how it works. That's just a bunch of marketing crap. So there's a lot of things that we need to cut through, because there's a lot of empty promises and about instant transformation. That's not the way it works. Again, think about learning a new language. Fear-based, right? Rush pilots. And a lot of people are sitting and doing things that they shouldn't. And a lot of people are sitting on the sidelines, but should be doing something. So there's both a freeze thing that's going on, as well as a fight thing that's going on when you start thinking about humans and the way that we respond to things. And then there's, of course, the marketing BS that actually comes through. So we need to cut through the noise, right? And when we do that, and we apply it correctly, these types of things can happen. When we start talking about having culture-calibrated AI, we're going to talk about that in a second, that will enable our people to actually execute, right? So we can improve their strategic thinking. We can impact costs, and we can also impact the ownership that they have in it. Also, I want you to read the middle where we say 424 breathing mechanisms. Again, I talked about mental performance mastery. Our people are under a lot of stress. If we don't help them to focus and work through that, they're never going to build acumen in anything, right? They're just going to continue to be on that hamster wheel of transactional processing, right? And we can't afford that, right? So time reduction in costs, reduced cognitive load, those things we have to be aware of so that they can take ownership. So here's what we're seeing in a lot of the big consulting firms I keep talking about leadership development and leadership failing and the issues associated with it is right now, the traditional old school way of developing leaders is currently in its blockbuster and taxi cab moment and probably doesn't even realize it. Think about the impact of that. We need to do things different. So what's your perspective? When you think about leadership development and why it fails today, just go ahead and put in the chat. I'm going to look over here, see if I can see the chat. What do you think the reasons are why it's actually failing? Thanks, Kevin, Alex, Carly, Kate. The answer is the one that Alex gave, lack of behavioral reinforcement. And we're going to talk about some research that validates that and what that means. Okay. So, and it was hit on a second ago by JMP, right? We send them to class, we give them all this information, and then we expect them to deliver, right? Well, there's interpretation that needs to take place. There's a new behavior and skill set that needs to happen. I mean, if that's not continuously reinforced, they're going to fall back to what they did prior to that. Right. So lack of behavioral reinforcement. Leadership is about behavior. What are my routines? What am I executing upon? It doesn't matter how good your content is. It really doesn't. It's just more information. And last time I checked, all of us are under hostage in regards to too much information being available to us. And here's another thing that we need to consider when you start talking about behaviors and the research and what the research shows. And guess what? All of us have phone factor issues. So when we start talking about our ability to learn, our ability to adjust, our ability to pivot, our ability to creatively think and innovate, we are all driven by these forces that are just human. And the last time I checked, I think we were all that. So we're human. We have to be humble and understand that we're subjected to these, and then to what degree. And there's a lot of things that go into that. So fear, we want to play it safe. Man, I don't want to take any risks. Might lose my job, right? I don't want to learn that AI thing is going to take my job. Well, it's going to if you don't, right? So we do a lot of counterintuitive behaviors that put us in a dire strait. Overconfidence. Hey, I got this, right? I call that the Holiday Inn Express syndrome. I stayed there last night. I can do that operation. I don't think so. And then negative impressions. I don't want anybody to think that I'm not competent. So therefore I just won't say anything and I'll just kind of cruise, right? And there are a lot of people have that issue. And then execution blindness happens in a lot of different ways. Execution blindness can happen from a senior leader perspective, not having visibility into what's going on at that team level. Well, I really don't know what they're doing, right? How they're leading their people. And then also we have execution blindness from peers. You know, I'm a supervisor, frontline supervisor, and especially if I'm remote, well, I don't know what they're doing and how they're leading because I can't walk the floor and go ask them and see what's going on, right? So all these phone factors come into play in regards to us changing and improving leadership outcomes, right? And then, so what is just inherently part of our human condition is that these things amplify what is called supervisor drift. Drift meaning, well, I think I'm doing the right thing, but then I actually find out that I'm not doing what the company expects. That's drift. And then when you think about that from team to team to team, we start having multiple silos of drift. Everybody's just kind of doing their own thing. And again, the risk is even higher at remote operations. And the science backs all what we're talking about here. So what do you think, or which phone factor do you see most in people now that you know the phone factors? Use the chat session again. Which one do you think you see the most? Fear, Kevin? Execution blindness? Execution blindness? Now, I will tell you, thanks for overconfidence. Yep. There's all of these are present. When we start thinking about an organization's culture and also their geographic location, these things stand out to have a much larger effect than others. Okay, so I want you to think about that. We talk about having, work environments where there's psychological safety. Well, if I don't have an environment that has psychological safety, it's going to have a different set of phone factors be present to a greater degree than a place where it doesn't have as much of that psychological safety issue. When we start talking about things associated with like DEI, right? Diversity, equity, and inclusion. Are we actually applying it and doing those things? Talking about JMP and the servant leadership, type of operation and trying to execute and have those behaviors be present and modeled, right? So these factors can shift and be more present in certain operations than in others. I talked about my background at AutoZone is fear. That was a huge factor because we had a very punitive environment, right? People were put on corrective actions, lickety split, right? And so when you have an environment like that, fear, and then also the negative impressions are highly present because, hey, I don't want to let anybody see that I'm messing up. So it's conditional. So if we talking about the modern workplace and and skills and competencies that need to be built, these are 5 key ones in today's world. Our leadership skills, and there's a lot of different, and breaking it down, there's a lot of leadership skills, and we have them available on our website, a complete list. But anyway, business acumen. It's always been a gap at the frontline level. Why? Because they've been transactional leaders. We need them to start thinking like strategic leaders. Digital acumen being forced upon us faster than it ever has. Execution acumen. It's like, how do we get stuff done? When you look at the research and reports associated with organizational risk, one of them is we're not finishing projects. We're not getting things accomplished. Execution is a significant problem for a lot of organizations. Cultural acumen. What does it mean to really apply and model those, for example, servant leadership behaviors? And what is culture? Well, how does that actually impact the business operation? People just hear it most often, or even, see the plaque on the wall or something, but how do I actually apply it and model it so that I can create a movement of the culture growing? So can AI help? And all of us are sitting here, and like I said, how can we cut through the 3 H's, hype, hysteria, and hogwash? Well, MIT comes out with a report and says 95% of Gen AI pilots are failing. Massive failure rate. Now, for us who've been around long enough in the contact center, we've seen the same thing with CRM systems. We've seen the same thing. I mean, it's just IVR systems. And these failure rates have been, around forever. Why does it happen, right? And then but ultimately we have to think about, as a senior leader, and I'm making a decision, is I'm putting my reputation on the line. I maybe even for some putting my job on the line, right? I need to make sure I make a good decision here. So how do I reduce my AI risk? I can't put my organization at risk. I can't put my people at risk. And those are much like the phone factors. Those are real and human. It's causing people to both jump too quickly as well as sit on the sidelines. So here's what we need to learn. And we're seeing more and more stories about this. And I can tell you that every single update these large language models put in place, this becomes yet another larger and more significant issue, is that we need to learn about culture-calibrated AI and how to have a tool and a system that will actually support and enhance and build our culture and the skills of our people, instead of doing what AI is going to do, which is make our people happy with their interactions. And so I want you to think about that. AI learns you when you use it, and it's going to give you what you want to make you happy. And so if I'm asking it about things that I should be doing and how I should be leading and how I should be doing that, it's going to give you an answer. Is that answer aligned with the company expectations and the company culture? That's a huge risk. So AI must reinforce our culture, not override it or trump it, right? It needs to align with the decisions within our organizational standards and reduce that drift by embedding expected behaviors. Look, this is how we want you to handle this situation when somebody comes to you and they have a performance problem and they're asking for more money. Otherwise, they're going to wing it. And that could open your door up to legal risk. You don't want to do that, right? So we need to scale the right habits across supervisors and teams, right? And even talking about that grooming of those supervisors in training. So AI can be the rescue, but only when it's calibrated. We need to train that model to make sure that it's representing the expectations, the practices, and the procedures of what we're doing. Scale those right behaviors, right? Okay, so here's a culture calibrated check. What do you think is the biggest risk of deploying AI without culture calibration? Go ahead and in the chat one more time. Let me know. Is it A, B, C, or D? What do you think, Michelle? So the answer is C. Yes, these other things are true. However, ultimately, when we start talking about where the gaps are with that leadership training, right? Where's the gap? The biggest gap is things aren't getting reinforced, right? People are falling back to their own, old habits, right? It's scaling the wrong behavior. As we always say, we can take a bad process and automate it, and it just makes it significantly worse, right? Same thing associated with AI. It could make our engagement, our turnover, our performance situation significantly worse very fast because it's driving our leaders in different directions, right? So C, scaling the wrong behavior. So the way for us to fix it when we start talking about culture calibration and putting this in the process and looking at human system development is we need to deploy a leadership execution system, right? And if we look at the research from the Leadership Execution Institute, we need to embed our standards within these AI solutions and tools and workflows so that it guides the decisions and reinforces their behaviors. So over time, they're learning new habits, new routines, new skills. And then we can start looking at and understanding what our consistencies are, right? Measuring the consistency and alignment from leader to leader to leader. And it's going to give us greater visibility into our existing metrics, right? So now I understand why there's fluctuation. And then also too, a lot of times these things go hidden within our metrics, in our traditional metrics that we use. So we need an LES in order to change the game. So in LES, when we start talking about capabilities, those competencies, they're developed and reinforced and sustained through daily reinforcement, behavioral consistency, drift detection, again, going off on different tangents, the culture calibration piece, and then AI-supported habit building. And it helps us to develop those 5 pillars that are needed today. All those different leadership skills from an emotional intelligence perspective, right? Recognition, empathy, self-actualization, all of those things are important, Business acumen, understanding. And here's the thing too, again, our counterintuitive minds. So when you look at an organization and organizational growth, and I was having this conversation with someone the other day where they wanted to double the revenue of the organization within a certain period of time. Well, from a people perspective, you can just understand that that's going to mean an organization is going to go through a lot of transition and change. Well, when a lot of transition and change happens, what do people start thinking about? Think about those phone factors, right? But having the conversation with somebody and saying, okay, if our objective is to double the size of the company, our jobs are more at risk when we double the headcount along with it. They're like, what? Doubling the revenue and doubling the headcount at the same time means that when the revenue doesn't hit, what happens? We cut people, right? So if we do a better job of thinking about redoing work and being more strategic and improving our positioning, and we don't double the revenue and double the headcount, it makes our jobs more secure. But that's not the way that we typically think. But helping somebody to understand, it's actually not saying we don't have kiosks here at Midway Airport because they take jobs, but instead saying, I need to learn how those things work so that I keep mine, right? So a leadership execution system, which is also critical when you think about change and transformation. I've had the opportunity to interview a lot of experts in the world of organizational transformation. And what they pretty much all agree upon is that we need to have a dual approach in regards to change and transformation. Yes, we often, know and are very familiar with the whole bottom down or top down piece, right? And that's how most of it is attempted. But the fact is, if we don't have bottom up, we ain't going to have change. We're going to have that 95% failure rate, right? We have to have it from both sides. So as part of an LES and the discussions that I have, as I talk about, look, we're not going to dump all this upon you. We're going to be able to, figure out where we are and then co-develop what's going to make your job easier. And that goes back into all of those competencies, understanding the business aspect, understanding, the human elements and pieces. All of those things come into play. And so much like JMP having to, talking about the whole servant leadership. Well, we talk about it a lot, but we maybe don't necessarily know how to do it. Well, let's build an app so that people know how to do it, right? Let's build it into our AI assistants so that part of their, messaging and everything that they're getting when they have to have, developmental discussions, or even when they have to construct emails and everything, it has the company's mission, vision, and purpose in regards to servant leadership woven within it, culture calibrated, right? Having champions, it's a critical element. Having, live elements and components, right? So that people can engage and see they're part of something that's much larger than just, their own little isolated location, whether that's in a center or their own cube in their home or office. And then that is a key to driving out fear. I understand this more because when we start talking about drift, and those FONE factors, it's a progressive model, right? Am I managing it? Am I keeping it under control? Is it localized? Or is it being reinforced and people are continuing to drive and go in different directions? And what about the organizational spread? Well, I have people all over the board doing different things. It's not a personality issue. It's a process issue. And then we get to the point to where it becomes toxic and it becomes a cultural mutation, right? Well, I know you say that we're supposed to be customer focused or employee focused or whatever the case may be, but this is what the experience is. Nobody wants to be part of that.
Jim,
yes.
As you transition to the next slide, there's a question in the chat. If you want to take just half a second and look at that and see if this is a good time to answer that question.
Thank you for doing that, Lon, because I can't keep up with the chat and do what I'm doing. All right. So Michelle, how do you think about the challenge of developing leadership skills at the supervisor level when it's possibly their managers and their directors that are modeling the wrong behavior? Boom. That is a huge issue. And one of the things in discussions that I have with the frontline leaders is I said, look, you have to learn how to stay grounded, even if you're not getting it from above, if you're not getting it from your peers. Because if you don't take a stance, guess what? You're a contributing factor to it. And I try to help them to build the abilities from the resilience perspective, as well as I share with them. I'm like, because a lot of times frontline people have this misconception that people who are at a senior level kind of know what's going on at the front line, and they don't, and they shouldn't, right? I don't know what you do day in and day out, nor do I need to know. That's called micromanagement, right? I don't want to micromanage. I got time for that, right? And so I help them to work through that because that is real. And it goes back to that whole FONE factors thing. They exist everywhere, but to what degree, right? And so for me to be that change agent, a senior leader, I need to proactively manage and understand that these FONE factors exist, help people to work through them, even though I may not be getting them from my boss. It's just a reality of life, and it happens everywhere. So how do you cope? How do you deal? And sometimes I help people understand, like, look, if it's something that you can't deal with, it may be an opportunity for you to look somewhere else. And you know what? That's okay, because it's a choice. So I either try to help them with where they are or help them find a different opportunity. Because some organizations at that senior level, you're right, it's impenetrable. It's like you're never going to make it budge. You don't have to stay. Okay, so I hope that helps. Michelle, you got any further questions on that? You can open up the mic and ask.
No, that was great. Thank you.
Thank you. So Mackenzie has said, and this is where one of the biggest problem is, and I think JMP even mentioned it, learning cannot be episodic, meaning it can't be, here's a lesson. That's even where an LMS is just a digital presentation or offering or our output to, information. We still, if we don't have that reinforcement, and an LMS can't do that, traditional training can't do that, coaching can't do that. The traditional coaching paths can't do that. It no longer meets the demands of scale, speed, and personalization in today's workplace. We have to do something different. Blockbuster moment. Okay, so what to believe? Well, we have, as I had mentioned, there's a lot of marketing noise out there. And I even look at some of these TV commercials and they're talking about, well, Janie's got 35 agents doing all this work for him. I'm like, yeah, right. That's just not the way it works. We need to make sure that we understand and stay grounded in that AI calibrated, not Gen AI, is what we need. Otherwise, it will accelerate people being and going rogue, right? It's because AI is going to give you an answer, and it's going to give you the answer you want. It may not be the answer we want them to have from a leader perspective and an organization perspective. So we have to believe in an execution system, not more training. More information is not the answer. And we need to believe in the research, not the hype. This is how humans behave. This is what humans do. We need to meet them where they are. So I was having a discussion with someone the other day. I said, heuristics has to be part of our understanding and proactive planning in everything we do. Now, heuristics is what? The love of our shortcuts, right? Just give me an answer, right? No, I'm not going to go through 10 steps of this particular process in order to be able to accomplish it. I'm only going to do 2, right? Heuristics has to be part of the consideration set. We need to believe in our leaders. They don't need more content. They need enablement. And when you look at the research associated with the workplace, like that's been done at Gallup, it talks about that and what they need. And we definitely need to believe in ourselves, that we have the ability and the opportunity to shape how leadership development evolves from here. There's things you learn today that you can't unlearn. Question is whether or not we do something about it. Talking about that continuing of the learning piece, and then I'm going to open this up to even more questions, and with JMP being able to do that as well, is you can take a 10-question leadership development scorecard. Here's the link. I'm also going to put that in chat. You can also scan the QR code. It'll take you to it. It's not gated, right? You can actually complete it, and it'll actually give you access to the FONE report, which goes and gives you more research findings and insights into what we were talking about today, and how a leadership execution system changes the game. So I'm going to put a link in the chat. Okay. Hopefully you all can see that. And you can actually go and pop that open and take it later. If you want to learn more about this, because there's a whole, we didn't even hit some of these other things that we were talking about in regards to the competencies and how to impact those and skills and things. We've created a glossary, like I said, it's of over 100 brand new terms in regards to this. You can actually participate in one of our weekly live Q&As, and that's the URL for that. Okay. Lon, it's on you, man.
Let's get to some questions, and I have one for Jason just to start. So how does this strategy for supervisors in training impacted the front end of that, the recruiting and hiring piece?
Recruiting and hiring hasn't. So our supervisor and training are coming from our existing pipeline, right? So these aren't supervisors coming in externally as a supervisor. So we do everything. We grow our supervisors from our agent level up. So it hasn't changed any of our recruitment per se, but the interviewing process, this has enabled them to ask more, I would say, technical or digital aware type questions around people's understanding of what the digital landscape is going to look like, particularly within the healthcare industry. Would you agree, Jim? We sort of like, they're starting to have very different style of interviews based on some of the learnings from the tools that we've put in as part of this.
Yeah, and I think it's really to kind of give that a little bit more context, is that his supervisors are responsible for their interviews, and that doesn't always happen in a lot of organizations.
Yeah.
So yes, those people now are getting a different perspective on what kind of people do I want to bring in the organization.
Right. Okay. Questions from the group. Who else has a question you'd like to get on the table? I know we've got a hard stop at 5 minutes to the hour, Jim. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we do have a little bit of time. Who's got a question?
I'll ask a question.
Great.
First of all, good to see you, Jim. It's been a long time. You and JMP did a great presentation today, so thanks a lot. Early on the presentation, you had mentioned, I think, maybe you had created some sort of app that facilitated some of this training, leadership training, servant leadership stuff, and I wasn't sure if I heard that correctly or not, but if so, can you elaborate on that at all?
Yes. So when we start talking about what we're doing within this LES, we're building AI assistants, we're building apps, and we're building workflows. So when I was mentioning about the servant leader app, it actually was brought out from a discussion that I had with JMP and his senior leadership team when he said, he goes, and this is an issue with just about every single organization, is that we talk a lot about servant leadership, but are we actually modeling it? Are we applying it? Are we doing the things that, cause people to see, hey, I am a servant leader. Hey, we are a servant leader organization. This is what it means to be part of a servant leader organization. And so our app actually helps people to be able to apply servant leadership principles every single day. That's a game changer. We did a lot of research on before creating that app. We don't know of anybody else who's created any type of servant leader app.
Mm-hmm.
Vantiv has it available.
That sounds great. Thank you.
Who else? Any other questions? Casey, Kirby, Kevin?
I have a quick
Catherine?
question. Yeah, I have a quick
Perfect.
question. You may have answered this again, but how do you keep people calibrated to the same level of servant leadership and interviews? And how do you role play also so that they maintain these? So what's the consistent reinforcement of it? And how do you know that each one is calibrated to the same level of these are the people we need and this is the level of leadership I need to demonstrate?
So there's a couple of ways that you can go about that but from an organizational perspective, especially if you're talking about servant leadership, and this is where coming from our typical contact center path, we have to be really careful because we start wanting to go into the quality assurance and compliance and all of that. That's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is having people engage with the process. And there's different ways that we go about doing that so that they will start applying the behaviors and the expectations across the board. So now here's the thing. You can only imagine, just like with anything else, you have certain people that just don't do it. What do you think is going to ultimately happen in that situation? They're going to find themselves in a situation where things have passed them by. And in a servant leader, if a certain leader shop, it's about, look, this is what we expect. This is what we will help to enable. But if you don't do it, that's on you. And that's just the realities of human.
I would also add as well that we created communities where we had champions. So Jim identified champions that came out of the groups, and those champions then were creating content and also using the tool. So it's like, okay, has anybody actually had this problem? Have you resolved it, right? So they have the tool that enables them to get some answers, but then they also can use the group to get more, because it depends, right? Depending on where they sit within the Americas region, right? And like Jim said, there's a lot of cultural differences, but we've created, I'll give you a great example, right? So Brazil is one of our growing teams. They're very self-contained. Not a lot of people across our organization speak Brazilian Portuguese, myself included. However, there was a lady in Canada who did, and she's now best friends with the supervisor in Brazil through this tool. And so we create communities that we didn't even know that was there, that enables them then to learn through within the application, but also outside of the application, so we can see that this is actually having a real positive impact as we create these different communities across our supervisory teams across the region.
Is the community within the app or do you use another function?
It's within the app, and then we also use Teams as well.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, they're a team shop. So our champions are using Teams, and then we are using the platform's community. Because again, it has to be part of consideration. I mean, are they going to take the time to do certain things to accomplish it? And the answer is, I need to be realistic to know that there's some times where they're just not going to go in our community. Don't be a fool, right? And don't force them, because that ain't going to happen either, right? You got to be smart.
Any other questions, or are we ready to close? I'll take that as a ready to close. Hey, I want to send a big thank you to Jim and JMP for leading this today. Very, very interesting topic, and I appreciate the perspective that both of you guys brought today. We are going, this event was recorded, and we are going to post it on the CCNG YouTube channel. So look for that in the coming days. Thank you, Jim, for putting the link that you did in the chat. Hope everybody has an opportunity to take advantage of that. I think that would be very, very valuable. So thank you one last time. We appreciate everybody who takes time out of the day for this participation. And we're done.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Everybody have a great day. Thanks.